Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy here on the Money Matters Radio Network. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment. Joining us by phone today is special guest Scott Hunter, author, professional speaker, and business coach. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
So you wrote the book Unshackled Leadership. What is the book about?
Well, the book is really, when you boil down to it, it's really about the world that we see when we open up our eyes. We actually have choices as to how we view the world. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it's unfortunate that most people view the world through the eyes of fear, and they don't really know that they do that. And so the book is intended to transform the way people look at their life, the way they look at business, the way they look at their relationships, because when you look at the world through the eyes of fear, nothing good is going to come out of that. So that's really what the book is about.
So have you always lived your life like that, or is it something that at a certain point in your career or in your life that things changed for you?
Well, the answer is no, I didn't live my life that way. As a matter of fact, for the first 37 years of my life, I absolutely looked at everything through the eyes of fear, which is what led me to taking workshops and classes and seminars just to kind of see if I could understand why I was so miserable about my life. And when I began to understand these things that I'm now sharing with others, that's when everything opened up for me. I was a lawyer at the time, and I decided to retire so I could really study how life works full time. And needing to make a living doing it, I started a coaching business to share what I was learning with other people, and that's how it all started.
Wow, that's kind of cool because you got over your fear by basically like leaving your industry. That's huge.
Well, I didn't. It's not like I left my industry to get over my fear.
Mm-hmm.
I left my industry because I discovered that there had to be, it just occurred to me that there had to be a better way to live a life. And I was determined to discover what that was. So for the last 30 years, I've been a full-time student, reading everything I can read and learning everything I could possibly learn. And so in that process, I have transformed my life, and my work is about doing that for others.
Scott, is there a difference between the way that successful people think and the way unsuccessful people think?
Absolutely. Unsuccessful people allow the circumstances to dictate their attitude. They're like 1 minute they're happy, 1 minute they're sad. They're constantly judging what's going on. They're like a weather vane at the effect of what's going on in the world. Whereas the successful people that I have studied, they choose their attitude. They're enthusiastic. They're optimistic. They look for opportunities. Life is not filled with problems. It's filled with opportunities. And successful people really have a dramatically different attitude than unsuccessful people.
I would agree 100%.
So you say that you help create extraordinary organizations. What does that mean to you?
Well, as it says in the very first sentence of the introduction of my book, after over 30 years of exploring companies of every type and size, I have discovered that successful ones consist of a group of enthusiastic, optimistic, appreciative, and happy people working together on behalf of a future they have all committed themselves to. And you know what? That is hardly ever present. I mean, according to the latest Gallup poll, 7 out of 10 American workers are either checked out or actively disengaged, so you certainly don't have the first half of that definition. And then most companies don't really have a clearly articulated vision that anybody knows about and certainly not committed to, so they don't have the second half of that. So that's what we do in every organization. When we go into an organization, that's what we produce, a group of enthusiastic, optimistic, appreciative, and happy people working together on behalf of a future they've all committed themselves to.
Do you ever find that there are some people that just never get along with other people, or do you have strategies to reach people like that?
Well, I wish I could say that everybody will ultimately learn to get along with everybody else, but that's not the case. My experience is that the vast majority of people, when taught what we teach them and given the opportunity to get along, the vast majority of the time they will. The one time that it seems to consistently not happen is when I go into family businesses and there are parents and children where the children are just carrying around a lot of anger and resentment, and they need help. They need to go to therapy. They need to go to a Codependence Anonymous or something like that, and to ask them to get along on top of a lot of anger and resentment, it just doesn't happen. So, unfortunately, it works the vast majority of times, but not all the time.
Wow. So you help companies grow and become more profitable. Do you have any examples that you could share?
Well, I'll give you two. Again, that definition that I gave. I worked with a company in 2005. It was a wonderful company. A man owned the company. He was a wonderful man. I had a management team. Their sales for 5 straight years were between 40 and 50 million. Not greater, not less, and they were not very profitable. In fact, in their most profitable year, they made $300,000 on 50 million in sales. It was pretty awful. But we went in there, and it took us about 6 months. We worked with every one of the 250 people in the company. We produced that result. By the time we got done, there was a group of enthusiastic, optimistic, excited, appreciative, happy people all working together on behalf of a future they all committed themselves to. And that very first year, they did $67 million. Next year, they did $89 million. Next year, they did $104 million. Their profitability was more than $5 million. So the company doubled their size, increased their profitability by more than 10 times in just 3 years, all because we produced that result.
Wow.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah. I'll tell you another amazing story. We work with a small company up in Victoria, British Columbia, and what's interesting to me about this story is that this company had grown about 9% a year for 25 years. So, I mean, they had a particular long history of growing at a very slow rate. And again, we went in, it was only a small company, about 50 people. It was pretty easy to produce that result pretty quickly. They were so excited, they said, let's up it 50%. And they set a goal of that year growing 16%. At the end of the year, they had grown 32%.
Wow.
And the owner of the company, the president of the company, was stunned. And I said to him, did something happen in the marketplace that you could attribute to that? He said, no. He said the energy in our company, the excitement, the enthusiasm, the focus is really what made it happen.
Wow. So how do you find that people sabotage relationships at home and work?
Well, we live in, like I said, we live in a fear-based world. Mm-hmm. And we allow ourselves to be dominated by the voice of our ego. Mm-hmm. And people don't really know what the ego is, but the ego is the part of your mind that actually believes that you are separate and alone in a hostile universe. That's one of my favorite authors, Deepak Chopra. That's his definition. Albert Einstein said the most important decision we make is, do we believe we live in a friendly or a hostile universe? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, well over 90% of the people believe we live in a hostile universe. They listen to the voice of their ego. So think about it. If you're in a relationship with somebody, and in your world, you're separate and alone, and they're the enemy, and in their world, they're separate and alone, and you're the enemy, how is that a formula for people getting along? And it's the biggest reason why people don't.
Wow.
Makes sense.
This is also interesting to me because I just celebrated my 43rd birthday, and my goal this year was to get rid of any remaining fears I have in my life, because I'm like, all right, I've lived half my life now. I want the remaining piece of my life to be fearless, because imagine what I could accomplish if I had no fear at all. So Bob knows, like, I signed up for pilot lessons. I'm going to be a pilot by spring. I just came back from a mission trip to Haiti, and all of those were steps I took just to overcome personal fears, because I think if I can overcome just the few last fears I have in the world, that I can go on to do amazing things in life and building my empires, etc.
Well, I agree. So, number one, that's phenomenal. And number two, it is a very worthwhile objective. But I also would recommend that you don't set yourself up for failure, because you do have an ego. You're not going to get rid of it. The ego is the voice of fear. I like to think about my ego as a little gremlin that sits on my shoulder and whispers in my ear, who are you and what do you think? So it'll sneak up on you. So I think you can get to the point where you're, in the vast majority of instances, you're going to be fearless. But and I would encourage you to acknowledge yourself every time that you do something that confronts your fears. But don't think. I've been working on it, Stacy, for 30 years. I haven't gotten rid of it totally yet.
Baby steps. So you talk.
Right.
How would you say that is the most effective way to deal with uncertainty? Because that's the big piece of fear. We're just uncertain as to what would happen. So how do you tell people to deal with that?
With uncertainty? Well, that's a really good question. I guess what I do, given that I know that I can either listen to the voice of the ego, which is the voice of fear and concern and worry and anxiety and all of that, or I could listen to the voice of my higher consciousness, which is the voice of enthusiasm and excitement and optimism and love and joy and all of that. What I do is I just take time every single morning. Most people get up in the morning, they get dressed, they have breakfast, they go off to work. It's kind of like going off to work unarmed, with the ego waiting to take over. So I take 15 to 30 minutes every morning. I have a whole ritual that I go through, and that ritual is designed to prepare me to go through the day with excitement and enthusiasm and confidence, and I do it every single day. And so I think that's what helps me get, whenever I see some uncertainty, I mostly don't react to it, because I know that it's not the truth of who I am, and I've kind of prepared myself for the day when it sneaks up on me.
Interesting. What about other people around us? One example I'll give you is I always tell my mother not to smear her fear on me.
Right.
Because that's what she tries to do. So, for example, last year I was supposed to go to Haiti, and my mother catches wind that I'm going to Haiti, so she starts sending me these articles of people getting kidnapped and killed, and it's so unsafe for an American to be in Haiti. So I ended up not going, and I was so mad at myself for 12 months that I didn't take that trip, that I finally took it this year. And as soon as she caught wind that I was going to Haiti, the articles started coming again, and I'm like, Ma, don't even send them to me. Don't smear your fear on me. How do you tell people to deal with the people around you that you end up scaring because you're willing to go after big dreams?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Because of the fact, I love the examples you're giving me, Stacy, because of the fact that that the vast majority of people live in a fear-based world, you can actually expect your mother to do those kinds of things. So, and that's what people do. I mean, you try to do anything that really steps out there and be bold and courageous, and you're going to run into resistance from everybody. So the most important thing is to surround yourself with a community of like-minded, enthusiastic people. That's number one. The second thing is, and I guess it's hard to tell you what to do about your mother, but if it was me, boy, I would sit down with my mother and have a really, really straight conversation with her and say, look, it's not acceptable to me that you get your fears all over me. I am committed to living this particular way now, and it's not okay with me. Now, typically you'll get a response like, well, that's because you're naive and you don't know. So I tell you, I've had to make some tough choices in my life. There was one point where I disconnected from one of my daughters because I didn't want that to happen. I have a sister that I choose not to have a relationship with for exactly those reasons. So, you're going to have to do the very best you can to draw a line in the sand and, like I said, tell your mother to cut it out and create some consequences if she doesn't. Now, you may not want to do that, but that's what I would do.
Right. And I find that when I go out and conquer my fears, like, I have definitely advanced my mother in many ways. I see her doing things that she would never have done 10 years ago. And I like to think of it that that's because I pushed her a little bit.
Right.
So she's taking a trip to Haiti soon?
No, she's never going to Haiti. She will probably never fly with me.
but here's another thing, Stacy. You could look at your mother as a person that's a perfect person in your life to remind you to not go there.
Yes.
See, you can have everyone in your life serves a particular purpose, and maybe the purpose of your mother being in your life is to show you what happens when you allow the voice of fear to take over. So you could, rather than being irritated by it and listening to her, use her as a way of reminding you to be the fearless person you're committed to being.
Yes, that is a really good point.
I like that.
Yeah, awesome. All right, I think we're
pretty much out of time, Scott. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
And by the way, anybody that wants to order Scott Hunter's book or check out his website, as he mentioned, he does coaching, speaking, and he has a great book called Unshackled Leadership. You can check him out at www.unshackledleadership.com.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Get Real with Bob and Stacy. Tune in again next weekend for more.